Hey everyone, welcome to the 10 Seconds to Air podcast. I'm your host, Alita Guillen. Today we are talking about finding what is important in our lives to achieve complete freedom. It's become so common to hear people of all ages say they feel like something's missing or they just are burned out. Blame it on the pandemic, politics, or the state of the environment. They are real feelings and real challenges that we have in the world, and we need to find ways to reclaim ourselves and our passions. My guest today is Emma Seppala, PhD, a psychologist, research scientist, professor, and author. Seppala's expertise is the science of happiness, emotional intelligence, and social connection. She teaches at the Yale School of Management and is the science director of Stanford University's Center for Compassion and Altruism Research and Education. You may have heard her TED Talks on happiness. She's out with a new book called Sovereign: Reclaim Your Freedom, Energy, and Power in a Time of Distraction, Uncertainty, and Chaos. She joins me now to talk about her research and to help us reset our nervous system to live a fuller life. She's proposing a 40-day challenge that is doable and free.
Stand by. We're going live. We're going live. 10, 9, going live. 7, 6, 5, going live. 4, 3, 2, 1.
Emma, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for taking the time. Happiness, sovereign. We could use a little reboot right now. It's really a tough time. You listen to the news or you pay attention to the kind of what's happening in the world, and it's easy to feel unfulfilled, despondent, a bit hopeless.
Yeah, things can feel really overwhelming right now, and they are. But at the same time, we do have the ability to claim our sovereignty and show up as our best self regardless. And, one example I give is that the quality of our life depends more on the state of our mind than what's going on. If you think back on the pandemic, there was a day that followed another day that were all the same, but some days felt really hard and some days felt just fine.
Yeah.
What's the difference? It's the state of our mind. And, you could be on a beautiful beach at sunset, but upset. And it doesn't matter that you're on the beautiful beach, or you could be in traffic and no end in sight, but you're in a good mood and you're dancing in the car. So that's the good news, because we can do something about the state of our mind. And that is what I've dedicated my research and my writing to, my speaking to, this idea of reclaiming our inner sovereignty, our ability to be resilient despite the chaos by conditioning our mind, our nervous system, gaining greater awareness, etc.
So knowing that many people you are going to talk to or teach are feeling like they don't have control over that, what goes through your mind 10 seconds to air, 10 seconds before you speak on this?
Always, I think, let my words be of service to the audience. Always, I have that intention before I go on air or go on stage.
You've been studying this for 20 some odd years, happiness. A lot of people are talking about happiness right now. We need it. How do you define happiness, and how do we claim it? And how do you study it? I know there are 3 questions in there. So let's start with, how do you define happiness?
I think everybody may experience happiness in their own way. But the way that psychologists have divided it is that there's one form of happiness called hedonic happiness, which is what gives you a dopamine hit. It's sex, drugs, rock and roll, money, fame, whatever, chocolate cake, all the things that give you a short burst of happiness, but it doesn't last. And then there's another form of happiness called eudaimonic happiness, which is what we gain from doing something for others, from connecting with something that is greater than ourselves, a cause or spirituality or nature, something beyond ourselves, doing acts of kindness, compassion. And what research shows is those forms of happiness lead to enduring happiness, not just that short little dopamine high that society will have us chasing. And meanwhile, where we're going to get our greatest fulfillment is in those other acts and that are beyond just me, myself, and I.
Yeah. Does research show how often you should engage in those kind of acts?
Well, at least once a week, I would say. Research, there was a study that looked at these individuals that had been through really traumatic experiences, like through war. And usually those individuals will live a shorter life because stress is such acute stress can shorten the length of your life. And yet they found that in this group they were studying, there was a subgroup that just kept living these really long lives. And they were wondering, what's going on with these people? And when they really looked into the data, they saw these were all people who in some ways were engaging in community service or doing acts of kindness for others. And so what that suggests is that when we engage in these kind of compassionate acts, we're actually erasing the impact of stress on our lives, which, if you think about it, is extraordinary, especially in these times when stress is so high, but also in these times when so many people need compassion. And what's really interesting is that in terms of our happiness too, research shows that when we do compassionate acts for others, it actually deeply helps us. And, not just live longer, but also be happier, have better mental health, a better perspective on our problems. So it's kind of one of the best kept secrets out there. Nobody's out there making money marketing compassion.
Right. And how do you measure that when you do the studies?
I mean, the studies will often ask people about their daily activities to kind of pinpoint what is it that is, impacting their lives. And there have been many research studies on compassion, looking at also when you have people meditate on a certain compassionate type of meditation, do they help others more? So you can actually train yourself for greater compassion. But I think for me, I like to keep it really simple. And so I always just think, okay, just may everyone I meet during the day, may it be an experience where I leave them better than I found them, right? Or at least not worse off, hopefully, right? But uplift, it's so easy to do something uplifting. Share a joke, share a compliment, share a smile. And what the research shows is that as you do that, you uplift yourself, which is really interesting, because oftentimes we'll think, oh, well, if I exercise and get tired, like that kind of energy, physical energy depletes with use, or emotional energy depletes with use. But relational energy, when you're uplifting or helping someone else, it actually uplifts your own energy. So it's really a beautiful win-win.
Right. So I just want to pivot a second. And you've been talking about happiness. Now you're talking about sovereign, regaining your power. Is it that different? Is it just a slight transition?
Yes, it is, but it takes it a little further.
Okay.
Sovereignty really requires awareness. You have to be aware of the programs run in your mind, the behaviors that you engage with, and whether they're helping you or hurting you. For example, whenever I talk to an audience, I usually ask at some point, I sometimes ask, how many of you are self-critical? To which 95% of the audience will raise their hand. And when you look at it from a psychological perspective, self-criticism is self-loathing. It's self-loathing. That's pretty intense for 95% of people to walk around with self-loathing.
Right.
And, there's this idea, oh, well, if I'm self-critical, then, that leads to self-improvement, doesn't it? It doesn't.
No, I see the head nod. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, beating yourself up actually leads to more anxiety, depression, fear of failure, less willingness to try again, which is basically the opposite of resilience. It activates your stress response. And I'm differentiating that from self-awareness. So self-awareness is being aware, like, oh, I'm not so strong in this, or I need help in that. I need to learn more. I need to get help. That's self-awareness. It doesn't involve having sort of a toxic relationship with yourself, right? But inevitably, the one or two people who don't raise their hands when I ask this question, are you self-critical, show up as so powerful. They're very sovereign. And it's not that they're self-absorbed or think they're the best thing ever. It's that they have their own back. And what doesn't make sense about that,
Define sovereign.
So sovereignty is an awareness of I actually have a formula for it, but it's an awareness of your thoughts and behaviors and choosing life-supportive ones over destructive ones.
Okay.
And so many of us, without even realizing it, are engaging in destructive ones. For example, oftentimes when people feel negative emotions, like what have we learned in society about what to do with the negative emotions?
I don't know. I just Do you keep,
Growing up, like, what's the thing that you're just sort of absorbed from your community? What are you supposed to do with your big anger?
what do you do? I don't know.
Suppress it, right?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it's sort of a vicious circle. I kind of think you don't do much with it. You keep it in your head and it's a conversation you keep having over and over and over again.
It
Doesn't
is.
go anywhere.
It is. And I mean, it doesn't matter how educated someone is or what level in a company someone is. Chances are they have as much education about what to do with their big, bad, negative emotions as a 5-year-old. None, you know? And what we've learned to do is to suppress. And so what happens? Well, first of all, that makes the emotion stronger, but that makes people also engage into all sorts of behaviors, addictive behaviors. And you don't have to be a drinker or a drug addict. You can be someone who's addicted to your phone or addicted to overworking or addicted to staying busy. You know, I mean, there's pick your poison, watching Netflix for hours, you know, and those are behaviors that are not life supportive.
Yeah.
And so my goal with writing Sovereign was, how can we gain awareness as to the programs, like, for example, the self-criticism that are running our head, or the behavioral patterns or addictive behaviors that we're engaging in that are standing in the way of us showing up at our fullest potential and our greatest happiness, because the two go hand in hand. Those are just two examples. You know, there's also sovereignty in relationships, and there's many different forms of sovereignty I discuss in the book, but this just sort of gives you an overview.
Yeah. So what is it that's actually happening that we are not, you're saying that there's just this layer that we can't even access what we need to access because we are spending so much time, I guess, beating ourselves up or in a conversation with ourselves that is just not allowing us to even access, to even begin the day.
The awareness, I know.
The awareness, yeah.
For example, I'll give you a very concrete example. So when I was in college, I would binge eat. So I would, whenever I felt bad, I would just eat whatever was there until I was feeling sick. And then I would cry and it would feel horrible. And I couldn't get out of it. I was 18 or 19 and I didn't know, I was so lost. I didn't know what was going on. And then one day I had a crush on this guy and he would go to this meditation on campus, which in 97, meditation on campus is like a really weird thing.
Yeah.
Only the real weirdos would go to. But I thought, well, here, what the heck? Let me just go. Right. So I went, and it ended up being this very strict Korean Zen, like stare at the floor for an hour with no instruction, don't move. Like,
you must have really liked him.
I know. I had no idea what I was getting into. And I was like, wow, I am never doing that again. You know, and I when I left, I felt a little calmer, but I was like, that's it. I'm never doing that again. And then I went back to my dorm room, and the next day I was feeling down again. And there was this disgusting looking pizza in my dorm room. And I thought, great, I can binge. But all of a sudden this light bulb went off in my head. It's this light bulb, and it was said, you always cry after you binge. Why don't you cry first? So that like one meditation, and I had gained that awareness that I had not had for years, that I was suffering from not having that awareness. Right. So I said, okay. And I went on my bed and I cried. And when I sat up and when I was done crying, the urge to binge had gone. And I never binged again. And I think of that as, it's like any addiction, you know, and we don't know how to handle our emotions. So we just grab anything we can to not feel bad. Right. Anything. Just give me anything. Give me the movies. Give me the scrolling. Give me the this. Give me the that. Or drugs, alcohol, and whatever. Right. And that's how most of us live, you know? And so sovereignty is starting to gain awareness, like, oh, look at that. If I feel the emotion, I'm free from it. Okay. But sovereignty also involves some courage, because it takes courage to go through emotions. It does, you know, it really does. But sovereignty is also like noticing, oh, like that self-criticism. Why am I beating myself up? Like I'm complaining about toxic relationships in my workplace or with people I'm dating. Why am I in a toxic relationship with myself? Like, how does that make sense?
Right.
It doesn't make any sense if you think about it.
Right.
You never talk like that to your friend.
No,
you know?
you don't. So so those conversations that you do have in your head, that when you beat yourself up over something, how do you recognize that it's even happening, right? Because you had this awareness, you went to meditation and that kind of broke your cycle, but many of us will re-engage in the same conversation. I have many conversations in my head that I would never say to a friend, or if a friend told me that, I would say, are you crazy? Why are you saying that? That's not true. You know, but I don't slow down enough, or I don't know how to stop that cycle.
Yeah. this is where meditation and breathing exercises are just so key.
Mm-hmm.
We live at a time with so much information overload, over 60,000 gigabytes of information coming at us every day. The speed of life is intense. The news is bad. So much is getting thrown at us that the only way to handle this kind of extreme time, like our ancestors wouldn't even have had to deal with this in a whole lifetime. What we deal with in a day worth of stimulation, right? Is to do something else that's extreme, which is meditation. Sit still doing nothing. Sit still and do some breathing. That's extreme. Why would you do that? You do that because in this time of extreme activity, you need the extreme stillness to be able to regain your center and have that sovereignty. And what happens, what the research shows is that the more you meditate, the more you have awareness. I mean, look, I did 1 hour and I had this moment of insight that forever nipped in the bud any kind of addictive behavior I could ever have. I don't have any addictions that I know of at the moment, none. And whenever I have had the desire, I want to eat this thing or that, now I check back in. I'm like, okay, how are you feeling? Ooh, look at that. You're feeling a little down. All right. Can we just sit with that for now?
Right.
So that's something that we can all gain. And so I'm a huge proponent of meditation, although, and I'll tell you, I couldn't quite meditate at the beginning very well because I had a lot of anxiety after 9/11. I was in New York during 9/11. And so breathing was how I started. I could talk about that or another.
So how often do you meditate? And for how long?
Every day, twice a day.
For how long? Come
what may. About 20 minutes in the morning and 20 minutes at night. A lot of people will be like, I don't have time. But, if you really check in with yourself, like how much time do we waste every day? Watching some stupid show that's not going to enhance our life. Maybe it'll make us laugh, but is it cultivating and conditioning you for greater resilience and happiness, well-being, or is it just dulling your brain? You know what I mean?
Yeah. And why do you think it's so hard for people to, I'm going to say people, I'm going to say for me, why is it so hard for me to just get started and to just sit?
You're not alone. Research shows that people would rather give themselves electric shocks than sit alone in a room by themselves. Okay.
Wow. Okay.
We are so used to, and thanks to our phone, we're so used to having something in our hand. Before the phone, it was like the cigarette or something, right? Something in your hand, something to calm your nerves, And so you're not alone. And so I would highly recommend starting with breathing. And so I was, like I said, I was in New York during 9/11. I saw the second impact and I was very anxious after that. Every morning at 8:30, my body would just shake, visibly shake before leaving my apartment. And I tried all sorts of things and nothing really could help. And then I walked into a breathing class offered by a nonprofit called Art of Living out of India. It was like this yoga stuff. And I was like, what is this? Like, what am I doing?
This was all calling to you, though, following the man into your meditation. And now something was calling you.
Something was calling me. And I was just like, what is this?
Yeah, I love it.
And then I, kicked and screamed my way through the class. And the instructor said, do this for 40 days to see the impact. And I said, yeah, I'm going to do it because I don't believe you, because I was so skeptical. And so I did. And then after 40 days, I realized, wow, like I can sleep. And it was funny because I was, in New York, people don't always smile at you on the street.
Right.
Come up to you. But suddenly people were smiling at me. They were coming up to me to ask me directions. I was like, what is happening? And I realized I walked by this storefront where there was like, you could see your reflection. And I realized I was walking around with like a semi-smile. I was like, wow, my nervous system was understanding what was happening before my brain would catch on. Now it's 20 years later, I still practice that breathing exercise every day as well. And I've done research on it for veterans with trauma. It's been, and for Yale undergraduates, it's been, it's amazing how simple these things can be,
right?
But how complicated we can make them.
Yeah.
And most of us are walking around with anxiety and also maybe some trauma. And so a first step of sitting still and trying to meditate can feel like hell.
Yeah.
And so I always recommend try the breathing. This is a really wonderful way to start, and it settles your nervous system from within. So then you can sit without feeling.
Do you teach that also? Do you teach the breathing?
I have learned to teach it. I don't really currently teach it, but I can set you up with an instructor if you want.
Right.
There's 2 nonprofits that offer it. One is Art of Living and one is Project Welcome Home Troops. And the thing with Project Welcome Home Troops is they offer it at no cost to military veterans and military families. So, that's nice.
So you talk about freeing yourself. You talk about getting to another place, right? We want to breathe, meditate, all of this to not wipe away, but maybe have a different relationship with that conversation that's happening, that's in our way. And you talk about getting free. What do you mean by that?
By free, I mean not trapped in ways of thinking, patterns of behavior that are harming us, that are not life supportive, so that we can live in a more life supportive way that can free us up to living at our greatest potential of happiness, of innovation, of productivity, of relationships, which it's our birthright, but we can get trapped, and our world doesn't help us. The messages we get don't help us. The messages we get that, we have to look a certain way, achieve a certain thing, be in go, go, go mode, do this, do that, do that, do that. These messages are not necessarily correct.
Right.
Nor are they helpful.
Right. And then you also talk about energy. And do you mean energy in having energy to do things, or do you mean an energy that you're giving out? What's meant by energy, accessing that energy?
Well, in relationships, I think we all know the concept of energy vampire and how you could be around certain people that are draining.
Yes.
But that's been talked about forever. And, one thing we don't talk about is how you can be around some people, they give you energy and they uplift you and they enliven you and they inspire you and they empower you. I call them sunshine people. Those people also exist. And what's really interesting, what the research shows, is that those people, as they uplift others, are also uplifting themselves and are also getting so much happiness. Giving and gaining happiness. Do you see that?
Yeah.
This is free.
Right.
Most of us, if we think back on the person in our life who does that for us, it might be a relative, it might be a friend. It's like that person means everything to us. They mean everything. And we have the opportunity to uplift others in the same way. And it comes down to 2 things. One is what the research shows is living according to values, which I think most people do. Most people want to be honest, have integrity, be compassionate, be kind. That's something that I think most of us are when we're at our best self. The only reason we are not is when we're stressed, when we're burned out, when we're overwhelmed. That's when those things can't manifest. So that's why the second aspect of being that kind of positively energizing leader is filling your own tank. Knowing how to do that.
Filling your own tank. Okay, what does that mean?
Well, I think different people might need different things, but the basics are, of course, the sleep and exercise and all that we hear about. But there's also some other things. Like we know that happiness, for example, increases activation in the parts of the brain responsible for positive emotion. So meditation, I should say. Meditation increases activation in parts of the brain responsible for happiness, but also acts of kindness. Like I was saying, those are things I've been saying, but also things like being in nature. So research shows when you're in nature, it decreases your anxiety, your depression, increases your well-being in just as little as 20 minutes. And if you can't be in nature, just being in your neighborhood park. And if you don't have a neighborhood park, having plants on your desk. And if you don't have plants on your desk because you don't have a window, then even having a screensaver or an image of nature on the wall. That's how deeply wired we are to nature. And then another aspect is food. Again, nobody's marketing this, but research shows that if you go from eating almost no fruits and vegetables to 8+ servings, you go from happiness levels of unemployed to employed.
Wow.
It's a drastic increase, which if you think about food deserts and so forth, that's a problem, but
right.
Filling your tank, and then I would say unplugging. If we're constantly getting stressed, like if the first thing you do in the morning is look at your phone, your first thing you're doing is you're activating your stress response. And I think that there's a point where people become addicted to stress, like addicted to adrenaline. Why is it that people have to drink so much caffeine? There's an addiction to adrenaline. It's just like any other drug. But what it's doing is it's burning everybody out. I have a theory that almost everybody's running around with adrenal fatigue. Life is stressful enough. Why do we add it onto ourselves?
Well, to get through to the next, if I don't have that cup of coffee in the morning, but I also am now noticing, all the things that you're mentioning about the phone, the coffee, that routine is really important. And it's really easy to not have that routine, to have a bad routine. It actually contributes to the negative. I mean, I'm seeing sort of two sides. The choices that we make and the choices that we don't make. The choices that we make don't even seem, even hearing you speak, don't even seem like choices. The grabbing the coffee, the grabbing the phone. If I were really thinking about how it made me feel and going back to what you were saying about awareness, I wouldn't grab that phone.
No, you wouldn't.
I might still grab the coffee, though, I have to be honest, Emma. I might still grab the coffee, but it's an awareness and a choice. And as opposed to saying, okay, my choice is actually going to be, maybe I do grab the coffee and I sit for 20 minutes, as opposed to grabbing the phone and getting some kind of quick adrenaline rush that is completely empty and leaves me feeling void. I mean, it's really incredible just hearing you say this and now thinking about just that separation, or that it's like coming to a fork in the road and making the wrong turn.
It's like you're sucking yourself out of the matrix. You see that?
Yeah.
Sovereignty is pulling out of the matrix, feeling like I'm right over here, making my own choices, feeling just fine. I'm right over here resourcing myself and filling my bucket so I can go back out into the chaos.
Mm-hmm.
It's really that. And that's what meditation is. You're pulling yourself out of the matrix and you're aligning with yourself. And in meditation, you'll find that you get your best ideas, you get inspiration, you get energy. And so my greatest, one of my greatest messages, and I teach at the Yale School of Management, the executive education program, and I teach a women's leadership program, is if you can meditate every day, you're going to access so much. It's like you're sitting on a gold mine. Are you going to dig, or are you just going to sit there, And when you can pull yourself out of this matrix of the crazy, you become so strong and you have so much perspective when you go back in.
Right.
There's a WhatsApp group that was created by a subgroup of the women on the last women's leadership program that we had, who decided to do a 40-day meditation challenge that I offered them. And they're all on this WhatsApp group saying, they're on day 31 now. They're saying, this is changing my life. I'm like, yeah. Oh, you're doing, and there's free, I recommend this free app called Sattva, Sattva. I love it. I use it every day. It's free. It's got tons of meditations of all different lengths. It's like, just do it for 40 days. Like, be a scientist about it. You're in your own lab. You're like, all right, I'm in my own lab. I'm gonna do this for 40 days. And if I don't like it, I'll just drop it. But it may just change my life.
Why women in leadership? Why is that so important that women are in leadership?
Yeah, I teach the women's leadership program at the Yale School of Management. And I often just see that the biggest thing standing in the way of women and their greatest dreams is their relationship with themselves. And it's so heartbreaking because they're so powerful. They have so much to offer. And I always think, what would this world look like if 50% of leaders were women? 50% of political leaders, of religious leaders, of corporate leaders would be a really different world. There will be a balance. Women bring some of the traits that are lead to greater peace, understanding, communication, protection.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's too much to ask, given that we have 50% of the population is women, And so I wish for women to, and men too, obviously, to really take those sovereignty techniques into themselves, because we need everyone, men and women, at their greatest potential right now. That's what we need you as. And in many ways, we're engaging in self-destructive behaviors. Can we turn that around so everyone can be so sovereign and model that for their children too? I had one instance where I was overwhelmed with my kids, and I said something like, I just can't do this. And I think I was crying. I don't know. I had a 3-year-old and a baby. And I remember 3 weeks later, my 3-year-old said the same thing that I had said to myself, to himself. And I was like, wow, I'm not going to pass this on. The buck needs to stop here. I need to model something different.
Right. You talk about power, that they're all feeling powerful. And I know you talk about that in the book. define power and what that should look and feel like when we get there.
I mean, I think the word power has been overused, I think, and sometimes has negative connotations, but I would say that I would call it your life force. We know when our life force is low, when we're depleted and tired. And we know when our life force is high, when we're feeling optimistic, when we have energy, we want to go and do things, we have creative ideas. And we've probably experienced both, right? You see a child, they're in full life force. And then, life bumps and bruises and crashes and burns and stuff. And there's times when it ebbs and flows and you're like, I can't even remember how I felt when I was 20, right? But there are ways to increase our life force. And that has to do with a lot of the things that we talked about, and when we engage in those and we plug out of the matrix and we eat well and we sleep well and we exercise, we try to get outside. And I know we're all busy. I'm busy. I work several jobs. I have 2 kids.
Yeah.
Get up at 5:30. People are probably like, gosh, she has all day long to sit around and meditate. I don't. I wake up. This morning I meditated at like 4:00 in the morning. My kids get up at 5:30. And then tonight I'll meditate when the village is at rest, But I don't miss a day because the return on investment is so big. It's just not worth ever skipping it. And if I'm on a plane and going across the world and somehow, it's a different type of day. And it's almost like I wouldn't go out without brushing my teeth and showering. Well, I wouldn't go out without meditating because that's what I'm doing for my mind.
Right. And how is it that we have sort of lost this ability to access what you're talking about, the things that we really do need to access to fill the bucket, to whether it's your meditation or your breathing exercises, all those things that allow us to be free and have the energy and access power. How did we lose sight of the first piece that you're talking about to even get there where we need to get? Now we're having to go back to just be in green space because we have lost just that natural ability to sit or to not grab the phone or to just be.
I know. Well, it's not in our education. We're not taught that.
Yeah.
We're not taught it in college. I just sat through college thinking, learning all this stuff, but I'm not learning what matters. I'm not learning how to live. I'm getting all this elitist information that, like, I remember the first day of college, you're the best of the best, blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking here, what are you talking about?
And you went to a top school, right? You went to, did you go to Yale?
I went to Yale.
Yeah.
And I was like, I literally almost walked out of the room when they said that, because I thought, really? We're the elite because we had the good fortune of being able to go to school and have books in our home? Like,
yeah,
that's not elite. For me, the elite is the people who are going out there changing the world, making it a better place. That's the elite. But when we're taught what is the elite, it's the rich and the powerful and all that. And it's like,
yeah,
in what sense is that? That's just luck, right? I mean, and I just feel like we don't get taught any of these things in school, and we don't get taught. And so then all of a sudden there's all these mental health issues out in the workplace. Well, yeah, you never taught the kids, and then you didn't teach the college students, and now they're in the workplace, and now they're like, I can't figure out life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of course not.
Sure. And so do you think that more of this needs to be taught when the kids are younger? What would the perfect world look like to you in teaching some of this?
My 10-year-old meditates every morning with me. And he says, he's like, I'm going to meditate so I don't get angry at that kid at school.
Oh.
And then, we talk about how meditation makes your inside stronger than the outside is. That's sovereignty in a word. That's sovereignty in a sentence.
Yeah.
Making your inside stronger than the outside is. How else? Why else? I mean, you just got to wonder, like, how are we going out into that outside world without making our inside stronger?
Yeah.
Right?
Well, a lot of us are entering it with a facade, and that's why we're feeling so empty or feeling so helpless or negative or, looking for a power or feeling despondent in some way. It's so common that people now are saying that they feel that something's missing. I mean, you talk about it in the book that many people are feeling that something's missing. Could it be the pandemic? Could it be the state of the world? It could be all of those things. But what I'm hearing you say, even with all of that that's happening, because there's always going to be something that we're going to have to be dealing with.
Yeah.
You can't control those things, but what you can control is that what's happening on the inside
Yes.
is putting that forward.
Exactly. My goal at the end of this podcast is for you to download that app and meditate every day for 40 days.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Okay. Say the name of the app again. I'll have it in the
Sattva.
notes. Spell it.
Sattva. I love it. I've donated a couple of my meditations to it, but I don't make any profit on it at all. It's completely free.
Right.
I just love it myself.
What is the difference to you between finding that power and having just too much control over everything?
Yeah. I mean, the ability to surrender is also something that is important, and to be able to let go, because we don't ultimately have control. And the more of that life force you have conditioned inside of you, the more you're able to let go when you need to. I think control is often connected to anxiety.
Yeah.
And not that you would never feel anxious. Of course, we all feel anxious at times. We all feel sad at times. We also all feel other people's emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you're like, why am I angry? But you've just been hanging out with someone who's got a lot of suppressed anger. And then you're wondering why you're feeling angry, but emotions are contagious. We know that from research. But the more you have that life force, the more you can also recognize, okay, this is worth stressing about. That is something I'm just gonna have to let go.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And I have the power to let it go. I have and it's something that we're not used to in our society. Surrender. We think surrender is defeat.
Right.
But surrender sometimes is just letting go.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You just said something where you said emotions are contagious. Emotions. Do you think that because so many people are now feeling stressed, anxious, all of that, we're just sort of perpetuating that, and it's a lot easier to feel that way than it is to feel calm and free?
Yeah. I mean, people are very stressed right now, and it is very easy to pick up on that. And that's why it's all the more important to come back to a daily practice.
Yeah.
You may not feel calm all the time, but every day you're pulling out of the matrix, you're calming your nervous system from within. And as you do that, you are conditioning yourself. So we go to the gym to condition our muscles so we can be strong. If something happens in the world, you need to lift a car, or something crazy, right? Well, this is the same thing. You are conditioning your nervous system and your brain, and you're putting them into prime condition to face whatever. And you may feel stress, but you will bounce back quicker. Mm-hmm. You will come back to center quicker. Mm-hmm. With a practice, it's like you can recover faster.
Mm-hmm. So let's tell listeners what they can do today to kind of make that change to be feeling better, to feel more energetic, powerful, fulfilled, authentic, all of those things. What do we do today?
Today starts your first day of a 40-day meditation challenge using the Sattva app.
Okay.
It's almost a non-negotiable.
Okay.
Non-negotiable. 2, live by this mantra. Uplift myself, uplift others. Uplift myself, uplift others. What am I doing? Is it fulfilling me? Is it life supportive? If so, I can continue. If not, let me move to something that is. And what can I do to uplift other people? Every person I meet, whether it's the person at the cash register or the barista at your favorite coffee shop or whoever. Mm-hmm. Those are 2 things. And then I would say, if you have anxiety, learn breathing. Learn the sky breath meditation practice that we researched with veterans. And if you have trauma also, it can help so much to settle your nervous system. And what we found with the veterans is that after learning this practice, they no longer qualified as having post-traumatic stress. And the results were maintained a month and a year later, suggesting that they had sort of permanently come back to balance. And I always wish, if everyone learned this, or if every young adult even learned this, there goes their childhood trauma, and they can move on with sovereignty,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And do you say that is possible? You can move on from trauma. You can move on from,
Oh my gosh, absolutely. I mean, we see it with the veterans. And if you're interested, or anyone's interested in learning more, there's a documentary film that was made about our study that's on YouTube called Free the Mind, where you see the veterans going through the class and afterward. And I wish everyone knew this, because there's so much talk of trauma now.
Yeah.
Whether you're on TikTok or what, everybody's got trauma, but it's true. Most people have.
Yeah.
But you can do something about it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's so easy to get stuck in that mindset of like, I'm a victim of my trauma. But you can have sovereignty and resilience over it. You can move on.
Mm-hmm.
And breathing, this breathing practice we researched, I can't talk to all breathing practices because we only researched the sky breath meditation, is so powerful for that.
Okay, 40-day meditation, uplift myself, uplift others, and learn some breathing techniques. Three things.
Also, the fourth thing I would say, go outside. Go outside. If you can be in nature, be in nature. If not, just go outside. Like, we live within four walls. It narrows our perspective and it robs us of the benefits of what we get from being around a tree, being in nature, getting the sun. This really dramatic impact on our nervous system and our well-being.
And it's all free.
It's free.
It's free. I love it. It's a 40-day challenge, I'd say.
Yes, I would love to hear from you.
Okay. No, you're going to hear from me. And whoever's listening, I hope that we all engage in this 40-day challenge. Meditation, uplift myself, uplift others, breathing, and going outside. Free, easy.
Yes.
It's a small commitment. It's a small commitment. It's just like you say, I wouldn't think of walking out the door without brushing my teeth. So I'm on to this. This is okay. Yes, all right. You're going to hear from me.
Good.
Emma, anything I didn't ask you or that we didn't get a chance to talk about? I know that we could go on, but I want to respect your time. And I just want to give people something to hold on to and be able to think about when they leave us.
I mean, if I were to summarize the research on happiness in one sentence, it would be: the happiest people who also live the longest and happiest lives are the ones who balance compassion for others with compassion for themselves.
Okay. On that note, you've given us a lot to think about. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this gift that you have instilled in all of us. I can't imagine that you have not changed anyone's life who is listening right now. You certainly have changed mine. So I'm looking forward to the next 40 days. I really am. Thank you.
Thank you, Alita. It was a pleasure to speak with you.